The diplomatic chamber aboard the Nexus station hummed with the quiet tension of interstellar politics. Captain stood before the assembled council of 7 alien species, his dress uniform crisp despite the 3-day journey through hyperspace. The station itself was a marvel of engineering, a massive ring structure that housed over 2 million beings from across the galaxy. The tall and crystalline, with bodies that refracted light into rainbow patterns, had called this emergency session. Their spokesperson, Ambassador Crystalline 7, gestured with appendages that chimed like wind through glass. The translator embedded in his ear converted the musical tones into words. Captain, humanity has been a member of the Galactic Coalition for only 15 standard cycles. In that time, your species has shown remarkable technological progress, yes, but also a disturbing tendency toward recklessness. Kept his expression neutral. He had been briefed extensively on culture during his academy days. They valued patience, deliberation, and what they called temporal wisdom. Humans, by their standards, were impulsive children playing with matches near a powder keg. Ambassador, with respect, humanity has contributed significantly to coalition science, trade, and defense, replied carefully. Our ships have explored 12 new sectors, established profitable trade routes, and our medical research has saved millions across multiple species. A chittering sound came from the representative, a being whose compound eyes reflected the chamber's soft lighting. The translator rendered it as laughter, though without humor. Saved lives? Your species nearly started 3 separate wars in your first year alone. The incident with the breeding grounds, the territorial dispute with the collective, and let us not forget the disaster at Station. Felt his jaw tighten. Station had been a tragedy, but it was not humanity's fault. A reactor malfunction in the section had threatened to destroy the entire structure. Human engineers had improvised a solution using what the other species had deemed suicidally dangerous methods. They had evacuated 40,000 beings before the reactor went critical, but they still blamed humanity for the destruction of their section. Station would have been completely destroyed if our engineers had not acted, said, his voice steady. Instead of 40,000 survivors, there would have been none. You acted without consultation, Ambassador Crystalline 7 interjected. Without proper analysis, without waiting for the senior engineers to devise a safe solution. There was no time, countered. The reactor was destabilizing. Every simulation showed complete failure within 20 minutes. We had a plan that could work in 15. We took that chance. The representative, a being of pure energy contained within a magnetic field, pulsed in a pattern that the translator interpreted as contemplation. This is precisely the issue, Captain. Humanity operates on what you call gut instinct and calculated risks. The rest of the galaxy operates on proven methodology and careful deliberation. Wanted to argue, but he knew it would be pointless. This was the fundamental divide between humanity and the older races. They had been spacefaring for thousands of years, some for tens of thousands. They had learned caution because they had survived their youthful mistakes. Humanity was still young, still bold, still willing to try the untested solution if it meant survival. The session dragged on for hours. Each species presented their concerns about humanity's presence in the coalition. The worried about human military expansion. The expressed concern about human cultural contamination. The complained about human trade practices undercutting their traditional markets. Through it all, defended his species with diplomatic precision, but inside he felt the weight of it all. Humanity had fought so hard to earn a place among the stars, and now it seemed that place was always going to be conditional, always under scrutiny. When the session finally concluded with no decisions made, just more committees formed to study the human problem, made his way to the observation deck. The Nexus offered a spectacular view of the Andromeda Cloud, a stellar nursery where new stars were being born in brilliant cascades of light and color. They will never truly accept us, you know. The voice came from behind him, soft and melodic with an accent that reminded of wind over water. He turned to find us standing a few meters away. They were rare in coalition space, a species that kept mostly to themselves in the outer rim territories. They were humanoid in basic structure, but with skin that shifted through shades of blue and silver depending on mood and lighting. Their eyes were large and luminous, adapted for the dim light of their home worlds. This particular was female, if was reading the subtle biological markers correctly. She wore the simple robes of a scholar or scientist rather than diplomatic attire. Her hair, if it could be called that, moved as if underwater, each strand seeming to have independent life. "I'm sorry," said, caught off guard by her directness. She moved closer, her movements fluid and graceful. "The older races. They will always see humanity as too young, too reckless, too unpredictable. It does not matter what you achieve or how many lives you save. You will always be the newcomers who do not understand the proper way of things." "That's a rather pessimistic view," replied. "I prefer to think that given time we can prove ourselves." "Time," she repeated, and there was something in her tone that made look at her more carefully. "How much time do you think you have, Captain?" "Is that a threat?" She laughed, a sound like crystal bells. "No, Captain, not a threat, a question. The galaxy is changing faster than the old races want to acknowledge. There are stirrings in the dark sectors, movements in the void spaces between stars. The old ways, the careful deliberation, the endless analysis. These things may not serve much longer." Studied her, they were known for their precognitive abilities, though they rarely spoke of it openly. Some said they could read probability streams, seeing potential futures branching out from every decision point. Others claimed it was merely sophisticated pattern recognition. Whatever the truth, they were rarely wrong when they made predictions. "You're saying something is coming," said quietly. "Something is always coming, Captain. The question is whether you will be ready when it arrives." She moved to stand beside him at the viewport, looking out at the birthing stars. "Your species has a saying, I believe, about the devil you know versus the devil you don't know." "We have several sayings about devils," admitted. "The old races are the devil you know, predictable, set in their ways, conservative to a fault. They will constrain you, limit you, try to make you into something more like them, but at least you understand their motivations." She turned to look at him directly, and her eyes seemed to hold depths of starlight. "The devil you don't know is already moving in the dark. And when it arrives, the galaxy will need humanity's recklessness, your willingness to try the impossible, your refusal to accept that some problems cannot be solved." "Why are you telling me this?" asked. "The don't involve themselves in coalition politics." "Because someone needs to know," she said simply. "And because in the streams of probability, I see you at a critical juncture, a moment where a choice you make will ripple across the galaxy." Before could respond, his communicator chimed. It was Commander Sarah Park, his first officer aboard the UNSS Endeavour. "Captain, we have a situation. Long-range sensors are picking up something in the sector. You need to see this, sir." "On my way," looked back at the woman. "This conversation isn't over." "No," she agreed. "It is only beginning. My name is Lyrazen, Captain, and before this is finished, you will have to answer a very difficult question." "What question?" She smiled, enigmatic and knowing. "Do you want me now or later?" Then she was gone, moving away into the crowds of the observation deck before could ask what she meant. He stood there for a moment, puzzled and intrigued, before duty called him back to his ship. The bridge of the UNSS Endeavour was a study in controlled chaos when arrived. The ship was humanity's first deep space exploration vessel, built with a combination of human innovation and carefully licensed coalition technology. It was smaller than most coalition vessels, but faster and more maneuverable. "Report," ordered as he took his command chair. Commander Park pulled up a holographic display. "Sir, we started picking up anomalous readings about 30 minutes ago. At first we thought it was sensor ghosts, echoes from the station debris field. But the pattern is too regular, too organized." The display showed a three-dimensional map of the sector. At the edge of the debris field, something was glowing with increasing intensity. "What am I looking at, Commander?" "Unknown, sir. The energy signature doesn't match anything in coalition databases. It's growing stronger, and it's starting to affect local space-time." Lieutenant Wei, no relation to despite the shared surname, spoke up from the science station. "Captain, if I'm reading this correctly, whatever that thing is, it's creating a localized distortion in subspace, the kind of distortion that could destabilize hyperspace lanes for light years around." Felt a chill run down his spine. The hyperspace lanes were the arteries of galactic civilization. If something disrupted them in a major hub like the sector, it would cut off dozens of systems from the coalition. "Have we the station?" "Yes, sir, there," debating the appropriate response. Of course they were. Could imagine the emergency councils forming, the committees being created, the analysis paralysis that would grip the station authorities. They would want to study the phenomenon, run simulations, consult historical databases for similar events. All good things, but none of them particularly useful if time was a factor. Commander Park, plot a course to the anomaly, best speed. Sir, we haven't received authorization from Station Command, Park said carefully. Noted, plot the course anyway. We're going to get a closer look at this thing. The Endeavour broke away from the station, its engines pushing the ship to maximum velocity. As they approached the anomaly, the sensors began providing more detailed information. What had appeared as a simple energy bloom was actually far more complex. There were patterns within patterns, mathematical structures that seemed to fold in on themselves in ways that hurt to look at. "It's a gateway," Lieutenant said suddenly, his voice filled with awe and horror. "My God, Captain, it's a dimensional gateway. Something is trying to open a door between our space and somewhere else." "Can we close it?" asked. "I don't know. The energy requirements to open something like this should be astronomical. Whatever is on the other side has power levels that dwarf anything we've ever seen." His mind raced. This was exactly the kind of situation the Coalition was unprepared for. They would want to study it, analyze it, form committees and subcommittees. But if this gateway opened fully, there was no telling what might come through. "Get me everything you can on dimensional theory," ordered. "Any research, any speculation, anything that might give us an edge." "Sir, most of dimensional research is theoretical," protested. "The Coalition banned practical experiments after the incident 3,000 years ago." "I didn't ask if it was practical. I asked for anything we have." As the crew worked frantically, found his thoughts returning to the woman, Lyrazen. Her cryptic warning now seemed far more relevant. The devil in the dark was arriving ahead of schedule. The anomaly continued to grow. Through the viewport, could see it now with the naked eye, a tear in reality that pulsed with colors that had no names. Around its edges, space itself seemed to be fraying, breaking down into component particles that danced in impossible patterns. "Captain, I'm getting energy spikes across the spectrum," Lieutenant reported. "Whatever is coming through, it's big, and it's almost here. All hands to battle stations. Shields to maximum, charge all weapons." "Sir," Commander Park said quietly, "our weapons won't do anything against a dimensional incursion." "Probably not," agreed. "But I'd rather die trying than sit here waiting to find out what comes through that gate." The gateway pulsed and reality screamed. And then, through the tear in space, something began to emerge. At first, it was just shadows, dark shapes that moved with predatory grace. Then forms began to take shape, vessels unlike anything in Coalition databases. They were organic in appearance, all curves and protrusions that seemed to writhe even as they moved through vacuum. Their hulls were darker than space itself, seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Count them," ordered, his voice steady despite the fear crawling up his spine. 3, 5, 10. Captain, they just keep coming. At least 20 vessels so far, with more emerging every second. One of the ships, larger than the others, turned toward the Endeavour. Felt his blood run cold as sensors revealed the ship's true scale. It was 3 times the size of the Nexus station. "Hail them," said, "all frequencies." Static filled the bridge, and then a voice, if it could be called that, spoke through the chaos. It was layered, multiple voices speaking in harmony and discord simultaneously. The translator struggled, producing fragments of meaning. "Harvest, consumption, resistance, feudal, surrender." "That's not promising," Commander Park muttered. Made a decision. Transmit all sensor data back to the Nexus. Emergency priority, then get us out of here, maximum velocity. "Sir, we should stay and gather more information," protested. "No, Lieutenant, we should stay alive long enough to warn the Coalition. Move us out, Commander." The Endeavour's engines roared to life, pushing the ship away from the growing fleet of nightmare vessels. Behind them, the gateway continued to pulse, spewing forth more ships with each pulse. Watch the tactical display as they fled. The alien ships were not pursuing, not yet. They seemed more interested in securing the gateway, forming a defensive perimeter around it. That gave the Coalition some time, but not much. "Transmission sent and acknowledged by the Nexus," Communications Officer Lieutenant Reeves reported. "Station command is requesting we return for debriefing." Almost laughed. The galaxy was potentially being invaded by something from beyond their dimension, and the station wanted a debriefing. Tell them we'll debrief after we've ensured these ships aren't an immediate threat to the station. We're going to perform a wide orbit, get as much sensor data as possible. For the next hour, the Endeavour mapped the growing invasion fleet. By the time they had completed their survey, over 100 ships had emerged from the gateway. They ranged in size from small corvettes to massive dreadnoughts that could devastate entire planets. And then the woman's words came back to with crystal clarity. Do you want me now or later? She had known, somehow she had known this was coming, and she had been asking if he wanted her help now at the beginning of this crisis or later when things got worse. His mind went blank for a moment as the full implications hit him. If they had precognitive knowledge of this invasion, they might also know how to fight it. But they were staying out of coalition politics, which meant they had no obligation to help. Unless someone convinced them otherwise. Made another decision, one that would probably cost him his career if it didn't cost him his life first. Commander Park set course for space, maximum hyperspace velocity. Sir, Park stared at him. Space is restricted. The coalition treaty explicitly forbids unauthorized entry into their territory. I'm aware of the treaty, Commander. I'm also aware that if we don't get help from someone who understands what we're facing, the treaty won't matter because there won't be a coalition left to enforce it. The bridge crew exchanged glances, knew what they were thinking. He was asking them to commit mutiny, to violate direct orders and break one of the most sacred treaties in coalition law. I'm not ordering any of you to come with me, said quietly. If anyone wants to transfer back to the Nexus, speak now. I'll have a shuttle ready within the hour. No judgment, no consequences, but I'm going to space with or without you. Silence filled the bridge. Then Commander Park smiled, sharp and dangerous. Well, sir, if we're going to commit career suicide, we might as well make it spectacular. Helm set course for space. The rest of the crew nodded their agreement and felt a surge of pride and fear in equal measure. They were betting everything on a cryptic warning from a mysterious woman and the hope that an isolationist species might be willing to break their own rules to help. As the Endeavour jumped to hyperspace, leaving the invasion fleet behind, wondered if Lyrazen had seen this too in her probability streams. Had she known he would come looking for her? Had she known he would risk everything on her implied promise of help? The journey to space would take 3 days. 3 days to plan, to prepare, and to hope that when he arrived, the answer to her question would be the right one. Behind them, at the sector, the gateway pulsed again. More ships and the hyperspace corridor stretched before them like a tunnel of distorted light, reality compressed into streamers of color that human eyes were never meant to process. Captain stood on the bridge of the Endeavour, watching the countdown timer tick away the hours until they reached space. 3 days in hyperspace felt like an eternity when you knew you were fleeing toward uncertainty while something terrible unfurled behind you. Had ordered the crew to rotate through mandatory rest periods, but he knew most of them were too wired to sleep properly. He certainly was. Commander Sarah Park approached with a data pad, her expression tight with concern. Captain, we're receiving priority transmissions from the Nexus. The Coalition Council has officially classified us as rogue. They're demanding we return immediately. Did they mention why we're considered rogue? Asked dryly. They list unauthorized departure from station, failure to follow direct orders, and violation of territorial sovereignty laws. The last one is pending since we haven't actually entered space yet. Park paused. Sir, they're threatening to strip us of our coalition membership. Not just court-martial for us, but expulsion for all of humanity. Had expected this, but hearing it still felt like a punch to the gut. Humanity had fought for decades to earn their place in the coalition, proving themselves worthy through countless trials and tribulations. Now he was single-handedly threatening to undo all of that. Any word on the invasion fleet? Park's expression darkened. That's the strangest part, sir. According to the reports we're receiving, the fleet is just sitting there. They haven't moved from the gateway, haven't made any aggressive actions, just holding position in a defensive formation. Like they're waiting for something, mused. Or building up forces, Lieutenant Wei added from his station. Sir, I've been analyzing the sensor data we collected. The gateway isn't stable. It fluctuates in intensity, sometimes almost collapsing before surging back stronger. If I had to guess, I'd say they're using those surges to push through more ships. How many more can they send through? His face went pale. If the pattern holds, thousands, maybe tens of thousands, and that's assuming the gateway doesn't stabilize and become permanent. The implications hung heavy in the air. The coalition had maybe a few hundred warships total, scattered across dozens of systems. If an invasion force of thousands emerged, coordinated and hostile, the war would be over before it began. All the more reason to find help, said firmly. I want you to pull everything we have on the history, culture, technology, rumors, speculation, everything. Sir, they are one of the most secretive species in known space. There's almost nothing in the databases beyond basic diplomatic protocols. Then we work with what we have. Start with why they're so secretive in the first place. Species don't isolate themselves without reason. As worked, moved to the observation port. Hyperspace always gave him a headache if he stared at it too long, but there was something hypnotic about the way reality bent and twisted outside the ship's protective field. It reminded him that the universe was far stranger and more dangerous than human minds were equipped to handle. His thoughts turned to Lyrazen. Her appearance at the Nexus couldn't have been coincidence. They rarely left their territory, and when they did, they always had specific reasons. She had sought him out deliberately, had known what was coming, and had offered help in the most cryptic way possible. Do you want me now or later? The more thought about it, the more he realized it wasn't just a question about timing. It was a test, a way of measuring whether he would be bold enough to take action when it mattered most. The old races would have debated, formed committees, analyzed all possible outcomes before making a decision, had made his choice in minutes. Maybe that was exactly what she wanted to see. Captain, Lieutenant Reeves called from communications. We're receiving a transmission. It's unusual. Define unusual. It's not coming through our standard comm channels, sir. It's coming directly through the hyperspace field generator. I didn't even know that was possible. Felt a chill, put it through. The bridge speakers crackled, and then Lyrazen's voice filled the air as clear as if she were standing next to them. Captain, you chose now? Good. When you emerge from hyperspace, follow the beacon. Do not deviate. Do not attempt to scan beyond the immediate approach corridor. The defenses around our space are not forgiving to those who stray. Lyrazen, we need information, said quickly. What are those ships? Where did they come from? How do we fight them? All in time, Captain. First, you must survive reaching us. The gateway you discovered is not the only one. Smaller breaches are opening across the galaxy. The enemy is testing your defenses, probing for weaknesses. But their main focus remains on the sector. They are building something there, using the gateway as an anchor point. Building what? A bridge, a permanent link between their dimension and yours. If they complete it, Captain, your universe will become theirs. Consumed, harvested, restructured according to their design. Everything you know will cease to exist. The bridge went silent, felt the weight of those words settle over him like a shroud. How long do we have? The coalition estimates 3 weeks before full stabilization. They are wrong. You have 5 days. After that, the bridge will be complete and irreversible. A pause. I will see you soon, Captain, and I will answer the question you truly want to ask. What question is that? Why we stayed hidden for so long, knowing what was coming. The transmission ended, leaving only static. Turned to face his crew. Every eye was on him, waiting for direction, for reassurance, for something that would make sense of this nightmare they'd found themselves in. 5 days, he said quietly. 5 days to find a solution, forge an alliance, and convince the coalition to act. No pressure. Despite the gravity of the situation, several crew members chuckled. It was a defense mechanism, new, but it was also very human. Making jokes in the face of annihilation, finding humor when hope seemed lost. The older races would call it inappropriate, called it survival. Commander Park, I want combat drills running continuously until we reach space. Whatever we're about to face, we need to be sharp. Yes, sir. What kind of scenarios should we train for? Thought about the organic nightmare ships they'd seen emerging from the gateway, about dimensional breaches and bridges between realities. Everything. Prepare for everything. The next 2 days passed in a blur of activity. The crew trained relentlessly, running through combat scenarios that pushed both them and the ship's systems to their limits. Lieutenant dove deep into theoretical physics, trying to understand the mechanics of the dimensional gateway. Commander Park coordinated with the other department heads to ensure every system was optimized. And received messages. dozens of them from every level of coalition authority. Some were official reprimands, threats of court-martial, and worse. Others were personal appeals from fellow captains, from the human delegation at the Nexus, even from the ambassador who had sponsored humanity's coalition membership. They all said variations of the same thing: turn back, face the consequences, don't make this worse. But mixed in with the anger and pleas were other messages, coded transmissions from ships throughout the fleet, simple messages of support. Give them hell, Endeavor. Some of us understand, Captain. The young need to lead when the old won't move. It wasn't official support, but it was something. A reminder that not everyone in the coalition was content with slow deliberation while danger grew. On the third day, the Endeavor dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of territory. The difference was immediately apparent. Where most of space was empty except for distant stars, this region was filled with a subtle shimmer, like heat waves on a summer day. The beacon Lyrazen had mentioned appeared on their sensors instantly, a golden thread of energy pointing deeper into the territory. "That's not any technology I recognize," said, studying the beacon. "The energy signature is almost organic, like it's alive somehow." "Follow it," ordered. "Slowly. Keep shields at maximum and weapons ready, but don't do anything that could be interpreted as hostile." The Endeavor crept forward, following the beacon through space that seemed to shimmer with barely contained energy. As they progressed, the crew began noticing strange phenomena. Sensor readings flickered and changed, showing impossible things. Stars that weren't on any charts, nebulae that appeared and disappeared, even what looked like entire planets phasing in and out of existence. "Are we seeing multiple dimensions overlapping?" Park asked, her voice hushed with wonder. "Or multiple possible realities," suggested. "If they can perceive probability streams, maybe they've learned to exist in multiple states simultaneously, quantum superposition on a macroscopic scale." Whatever the explanation, it was clear that space operated under different rules than the rest of the galaxy. The very fabric of reality here was more flexible, more responsive to observation and intent. After 6 hours of careful navigation, they finally saw their destination. It wasn't a planet, not exactly. It was a construct, a massive structure that seemed to be part space station, part living organism, part work of art. It spiraled outward in fractal patterns, each layer containing gardens and structures and things that easy categorization. The whole thing pulsed gently with internal light, shifting through colors that human eyes struggled to process. "My God," Park breathed, "how many people live there?" "According to what little records we have, the entire civilization. About 3 billion souls." Paused. "Captain, I'm reading multiple timeline signatures from that structure. It's not just existing in the present. Parts of it are phased into the past and future simultaneously." Tried to wrap his mind around that concept and failed. A civilization that existed partially outside linear time would have perspectives and capabilities that others couldn't begin to match. No wonder they could see what was coming. The beacon led them to a docking bay that seemed to materialize as they approached. The Endeavor settled into position, magnetic locks engaging with a gentle thump. Turned to his crew. "I'm going alone." "Sir, that's not advisable," Park protested. "It's necessary. They know we're here. They know why we came. If Lyrazen wanted to harm us, we'd already be dead. This is a diplomatic contact, and it needs to be handled carefully." He managed a slight smile. "Besides, if things go wrong, I need you here to get the ship and crew back to Coalition space." Park didn't look happy, but she nodded. "We'll be ready to extract you at a moment's notice, sir." Changed into his formal diplomatic uniform, complete with all the decorations and medals he'd earned during his career. If he was going to represent humanity to a species that could see across time itself, he was going to look the part. The airlock opened and stepped into space. The docking bay was unlike anything he'd seen before. The walls seemed to be made of light into matter, shifting through gentle pastels. The air smelled of flowers he couldn't name and something else, something that reminded him of libraries and old books and the moment before rain. It was deeply pleasant and deeply unnerving all at once. Lyrazen stood waiting for him, but she wasn't alone. Behind her stood 7 other, each wearing robes that marked them as people of importance. Their skin patterns were more complex than hers, more refined, suggesting age and authority. "Captain," Lyrazen greeted him. "Welcome to Prime. These are the Temporal Council, the leaders of my people." She gestured to each in turn. High Oracle who sees farthest into the streams, Marshal or who guides our defenses, Scholar Ra, keeper of knowledge, and 4 others whose names you need not burden yourself with yet. The High Oracle stepped forward. Her eyes were ancient, containing depths that made feel like a child. When she spoke, her voice resonated with harmonics that suggested multiple speaking in unison. Captain of the species humanity, you have come seeking help against the harvesters, the beings your people witnessed emerging from the dimensional gateway. You believe we have knowledge that can save your coalition. You are correct, and you are also willing to pay any price to access that knowledge. On this, you are foolish. Kept his composure. With respect, High Oracle, when facing extinction, there are few prices too high to pay. Spoken like one who has never truly paid such prices, she replied, but not unkindly. The harvesters are older than your coalition, older than most of the species within it. They have consumed 17 galaxies that we know of, possibly more. They exist partially outside normal spacetime, which is why your weapons and shields will be useless against them. Then how do we fight them? You don't, Marshal or said bluntly. Not as you are. Your ships, your technology, your military doctrine. All of it is designed for conventional warfare against conventional enemies. The harvesters are not conventional. They are entropy given purpose, feeding on the ordered energy of living civilizations. Felt despair creeping in, but he pushed it back. Then teach us. Show us how to adapt. You obviously have the knowledge, or you wouldn't have survived their attention. The council members exchanged glances and realized they were communicating in ways he couldn't perceive. Finally, Scholar Ra spoke. We survived by hiding, Captain, by existing partially outside the timeline they hunt through. We saw them coming and go and made ourselves invisible to their perception. But that path is closed to your coalition. You are too many, too spread out, too anchored in linear time. You cannot hide as we did. So you'll just watch while they destroy us? Asked, unable to keep the bitterness from his voice. No, Lyrazen said softly. We will offer you another path. It is why I came to you, why I asked my question, but you must understand what you are choosing. She stepped closer, and suddenly was seeing more than just the docking bay. Images flooded his mind, timelines branching and converging, possibilities spreading out like a vast tree of light. He saw the coalition falling, worlds burning, the harvesters spreading like cancer across the galaxy. He saw humanity fighting desperately and losing, ship after ship consumed by the entropic touch of the enemy. But he also saw other paths, narrower, more dangerous, but possible. He saw human ships moving in ways they shouldn't be able to, saw technology that bent reality rather than just manipulating it. He saw victories snatched from certain defeat through desperate gambles and impossible luck. And he saw the price. He saw what would be required to walk those narrow paths to survival. The visions faded, leaving gasping. Lyrazen caught him as his knees buckled, her touch cool and steadying. Now you understand, she said quietly. Now you see why I asked if you wanted me now or later. The help we can offer will change humanity forever. It will require you to abandon some of what makes you human and embrace something stranger, something that the old races will fear even more than they fear the harvesters. Looked up at her, at the council beyond her, at the impossible city structure of Prime visible through the bay's transparent sections. His mind was still reeling from the visions, but one thing was crystalline clear. The path forward was not going to be easy or clean. It was going to be messy, dangerous, and possibly catastrophic. The council chamber existed in a space that's brain insisted wasn't possible. The walls curved in directions that geometry shouldn't allow, and through them he could see moments of time like windows looking into different rooms. In one, he watched children learning to manipulate probability streams. In another, he saw what looked like himself, older and standing on the bridge of a ship that didn't exist yet. The vision made his head hurt. Do not try to understand all of it at once, High Oracle advised, nodding his discomfort. Your species perceives time linearly, a single thread from past to future. We see it as a tapestry, all moments existing simultaneously, influenced by observation and choice. It takes decades of training for even our children to navigate it properly. Forced his attention back to the present moment, or at least the version of the present where he stood before the temporal council. You said there was a price for your help. What is it? Marshal or projected an image into the center of the chamber. It showed a schematic of what looked like a modified coalition warship, but with components that didn't recognize. Strange crystalline structures integrated into the hull, networks of what appeared to be living tissue running through the ship's systems, and at the heart of it all, something that pulsed with the same temporal energy he'd seen throughout Prime. The harvesters exist partially outside normal spacetime, the Marshal explained. Your weapons cannot harm them because they are never fully present when you fire. By the time your energy beams reach their location, they have already moved through probability space to avoid them. Not faster than light travel, but probability manipulation. They exist in the timeline where your shot misses. That's insane, said. How do you fight something that can just choose not to be hit? You learn to exist in multiple timelines simultaneously, Scholar Ra answered. You fire not one shot, but infinite shots across all possible timelines, collapsing the probability wave so that at least one version strikes true. This requires technology that merges quantum mechanics with biological consciousness. Technology that we possess, but sharing it will change your species fundamentally. Lyrazen moved to stand beside the projection. The modifications required to make your ships capable of fighting the harvesters will integrate biotechnology directly with your vessels and crews. Neural links that connect human consciousness to the ship's probability drives. Organic computing systems that exist in quantum superposition. Your ships will become living things, Captain, and your crews will be permanently bonded to them. Stared at the schematic, his mind racing through implications. Permanently? You mean the crew can never leave their ships? They become one with their vessels, Lyrazen confirmed. The neural integration is irreversible. They will live as long as their ships survive, centuries potentially, but they will never walk on solid ground again, never embrace their families, never be fully human in the way they were before. The weight of that hit hard. He was asking his crew to give up their humanity to save humanity. The paradox would have been funny if it weren't so tragic. And if we don't accept these modifications? Asked, though he already knew the answer. Then your coalition falls, High Oracle said simply. The harvesters complete their bridge, and within a generation your entire galaxy is consumed. We have seen this timeline. It is the most probable outcome by significant margin. But with your modifications, we have a chance. A small one, the High Oracle admitted. Even with our technology, the odds favor the harvesters. They have done this to 17 galaxies. They are very, very good at consumption. But there are narrow paths through the probability streams where your species prevails. Paths that require sacrifice, courage, and a willingness to become something more than you are. Thought about his crew aboard the Endeavor. Sarah Park, who had family waiting for her back on Earth. Wei, who talked constantly about retiring to teach at the academy someday. Reeves, who was engaged to be married next year. Every single person aboard had lives, dreams, futures that didn't involve becoming permanently fused with a starship. Can I ask them? Said, give them the choice. Of course, Lyrazen replied. We are not monsters, Captain. We do not force transformation on the unwilling. But understand this, every ship that undergoes modification increases your chances of survival. Every crew that volunteers tips the probability scales in your favor. You will need dozens of converted vessels to have any real chance. Hundreds would be better. Felt the enormity of what he was being asked to do. Return to the coalition with this offer, convince entire crews to give up their humanity, persuade the conservative leadership to approve technology they would see as abomination, and do it all in 5 days. There's something you're not telling me, said, reading the subtle shifts in Lyrazen's expression. Something about why you're helping us at all. Your people could stay hidden, let the harvesters consume our galaxy and move on. Why take this risk? The council members exchanged those invisible communications again. Finally, High Oracle spoke, her ancient eyes sad. Because we have seen what comes after. If the harvesters complete their bridge in your galaxy, they will have access to technology and resources that will make them unstoppable. They will find us eventually. Our hiding will fail. The question is not whether we fight, but when. She paused. And because in the probability streams we see something we never expected to see. We see humanity, reckless and young and stubborn, finding paths to victory that should not exist. You create new probabilities through sheer refusal to accept defeat. It is fascinating, and it might be exactly what this war needs. You're betting on human stubbornness, said, almost laughing. We are betting on human innovation, Marshall corrected. Your species has been in space for less than a century, yet you have already developed new approaches to problems that took other races to solve. You think differently because you haven't learned all the reasons why things are impossible. That ignorance is a strategic advantage. Scholar Rob brought up another projection, this one showing coalition space with hundreds of red markers spreading like infection from the sector. The harvesters are opening secondary gates throughout your territory, small ones but growing. They are establishing beachheads, preparing for full invasion once their primary bridge stabilizes. Your coalition is mobilizing its fleets, but they are deploying conventional forces to each breach. It will be massacre. How long until these secondary breaches become major threats? 3 days. After that, the harvesters will begin planetary consumption. They will target agricultural worlds first, stripping them of biological material to fuel their expansion. Billions will die in the first wave. His hands clenched into fists. 3 days to return to coalition space, convince the leadership to accept modifications, and get enough ships converted to make a difference. It was impossible. But then, humanity specialized in the impossible. "What do you need from me right now?" asked. Lyrazen smiled, and there was something fierce in her expression. "Permission to board your ship and begin the modification process. The Endeavor will be the prototype, the proof of concept that this can work. Your crew will be the first to undergo transformation if they consent, and you, Captain, will be the neural core around which the entire system revolves." "Me specifically, why?" "Because you asked the right question when I offered you a choice," Lyrazen said. "Now versus later. Most would have hesitated, deliberated, tried to gather more information before deciding. You chose action. That decisiveness, that willingness to take risks, is exactly what the neural core requires. The ship will need a consciousness that can make split-second decisions across multiple timelines simultaneously. It needs someone who trusts their instincts even when logic says otherwise." Looked at the projection of the modified ship again. Beautiful and terrible in equal measure. A fusion of technology and biology, of human determination and temporal mastery. It would be a weapon unlike anything the galaxy had seen. "If I agree, what happens to me?" "You become one with the Endeavor. Your consciousness expands to fill the ship, perceiving through its sensors, thinking through its computers, existing in quantum superposition across multiple probable timelines. You will still be, but you will also be so much more. The limitation is that you can never leave the ship. Your body will be maintained in a suspension chamber at the ship's core, while your mind ranges across space-time itself." "Will I still be human?" Lyrazen's expression softened. "That is the question every species asks when they face transformation. What makes you human, Captain? Your body, your mind, your ability to love, to hope, to fight against impossible odds. Those things don't disappear with physical transformation. They become amplified, expanded, evolved into something greater." She paused. "But yes, you will be different. Changed. What you become will be something new." Thought about his career, his life, his plans for the future. He had always imagined retiring someday, maybe teaching at the academy like wanted to do, passing on his knowledge to the next generation. That future was gone now, erased by the reality of what the galaxy needed him to become. But then he thought about Earth, about the billions of humans just beginning to explore the stars. He thought about all the species in the coalition, the good and the bad, the wise and the foolish. He thought about children on thousands of worlds who would never see another sunrise if the harvesters won. "I need to talk to my crew," said finally. "Of course, take all the time you need." Lyrazen gestured, and somehow they were standing at the airlock to the Endeavor again. Time had folded in on itself during their conversation, realized. They had talked for hours, but no time had passed aboard his ship. "When you are ready, I will be waiting." Returned to his ship, his mind churning with everything he'd learned. The crew was assembled in the main conference room within minutes of his return, their faces showing the strain of the past few days. "I won't sugarcoat this," began. "What I'm about to propose will sound insane, but it's our only shot at stopping what's coming." He explained everything. The nature of the harvesters, their ability to exist across probability spaces, the modifications that would be required to fight them. He showed them the schematics, explained the process, and made absolutely clear what it would cost. "Full neural integration," he said. "Permanent fusion with the ship. You become the Endeavor, and the Endeavor becomes you. You'll live for centuries, experience reality in ways no human has before, and wield power beyond anything we've known. But you'll never walk on Earth again, never feel rain on your face, never hold the people you love." The silence was deafening. Watched emotions play across their faces, shock, fear, anger, and something else. Something that might have been dark excitement. Commander Parks spoke first. "If we don't do this, what happens to Earth?" Earth is consumed along with everything else. The harvesters don't distinguish between military and civilian targets. They just harvest. And if we do this, we have a chance to stop them. A small chance, but it's a chance. Park nodded slowly. Then I'm in. My family would rather have me alive as part of a ship than dead while the world burns. At least this way I can protect them. Count me in too, Wei said. I wanted to teach someday, sure, but there won't be any students left if we lose. Better to become something strange and powerful than to watch civilization die. One by one, the crew volunteered. Not all of them, but enough. Out of the 150 people aboard the Endeavour, 127 agreed to undergo the transformation. The others arranged to have transferred back to Coalition space with all the data they'd gathered. They would spread the word, prepare others for what was coming. 23 people chose to remain human. Couldn't blame them. What he was asking was monstrous in its own way. That night, as the prepared to begin the modification process, stood in his quarters one last time as just a human being. He recorded messages for his family, for friends, for the people who had shaped his life. He didn't know if they would ever receive them, but he needed to say goodbye to who he had been. Lyra Zen found him there as dawn broke over Prime, if such a place could have dawn. "Are you ready?" she asked. "No," admitted, "but I'm doing it anyway." "That is very human of you," she smiled. "The procedure will take 48 hours. During that time you will experience things that cannot be described in linear language. You will exist in all possible states simultaneously. It will be overwhelming, possibly terrifying, but you will emerge stronger, faster, more capable than you can imagine." "Will I still be me?" "More than ever," Lyra Zen promised. "The essence of who you are, your courage and determination and stubborn refusal to give up, that becomes the foundation of everything else. You won't lose yourself. You will find yourself across infinite possibilities." The modification chamber was at the heart of the ship, a space that had been redesigned by engineers in the hours since they'd come aboard. It looked like something from a dream, crystalline structures pulsing with soft light, organic cables that moved like living things, and at the center, a pod filled with luminescent fluid. His crew was already in their own pods, suspended in transformation. He could feel their presence somehow, their minds already beginning to link with the ship's systems. They were afraid, but they were also excited. This was exploration of a kind humanity had never attempted before. "Once you enter the pod, the neural integration will begin," Lyra Zen explained. "Your consciousness will expand to encompass the entire ship. You'll feel every system, every circuit, every crew member as if they were part of your own body. It will be disorienting at first, but your mind will adapt quickly." Looked at the pod, at his future prison and palace combined. "Promise me something." "If I can." "Promise me that if this works, if we beat the harvesters, you'll help us find a way to undo this. To let my crew become human again." Lyra Zen was quiet for a long moment. "I cannot promise that. The transformation is designed to be irreversible. But I can promise that we will search for a way. And if you prevail, if you save the galaxy from the harvesters, my people will owe you a debt that we will spend lifetimes trying to repay." It wasn't the answer wanted, but it was honest. He appreciated that. "Then let's begin." Stepped into the pod and the warm fluid rose around him. He felt the neural connectors attached to his skull, felt the first tendrils of foreign consciousness reaching into his mind. For a moment, panic seized him. This was wrong, unnatural, too alien to endure. But then he felt his crew around him, their minds touching his. Park's steady determination, his brilliant curiosity, Reeves's fierce loyalty, all of them connected, all of them becoming something more than individual humans. The last thing thought as his identity began to dissolve and reform was how strange it was that his mind had gone blank that day on the Nexus when Lyra Zen asked her question. He had thought it was confusion. Now he understood it was possibility opening up before him. Infinite futures converging on a single moment woke up everywhere at once. His consciousness no longer resided in a single point, but spread throughout the Endeavour like blood through veins. He was the engines, feeling their power as his own muscles. He was the sensors, perceiving the universe in spectrums that human eyes could never see. He was the hull, feeling the gentle caress of cosmic radiation against his skin. And he was still himself, but so much more. The crew existed within him now, each mind a distinct presence that he could sense and communicate with instantaneously. Park was a steady anchor point near the primary helm controls. Her consciousness merged with the navigation systems. Had become one with the science stations, his natural curiosity amplified to the point where he was simultaneously running thousands of calculations. Reeves and the communications array were now a single entity, able to process and respond to dozens of channels simultaneously. But it was the temporal perception that truly overwhelmed him. Could see time now, not as a linear progression, but as a vast ocean of possibilities. Every decision created waves that rippled forward and backward, creating eddies and currents of probability. He saw the endeavor as it was, as it had been, and as it might become all at once. "Breathe, Captain," Lyrazen's voice came through speakers that were now part of his body. "Or the equivalent of breathing, you're trying to process everything at once. Focus on the present moment first, then gradually expand your awareness." Tried to follow her advice, but it was like trying to focus on a single drop of water while swimming in an ocean. Every system demanded his attention. Every crew member's thoughts brushed against his consciousness. Every possible future screamed for consideration. "He's fragmenting," he heard Marshall say, the words reaching him through multiple timelines simultaneously. "The human mind isn't adapted for this level of integration." "Give him time," Lyrazen responded. "Humanity's strength has always been adaptability. He'll find his center." Felt panic rising, threatening to shatter his consciousness across infinite probability streams. He was losing himself, dissolving into the vastness of what he had become. The ship was too big, too complex, too much for any single mind to contain. But then he felt Park's presence reaching out to him through their shared neural link. Her thoughts were clear and strong. "Sir, you're not alone in this. We're all here. Use us. Let us help carry the load." His voice joined hers. "Think of it like delegation, Captain. You don't need to process everything yourself. Trust your crew." And suddenly understood. He wasn't supposed to control everything. He was the core, the decision maker, the consciousness that guided the whole. But his crew were the specialists, each one taking responsibility for their domains. Together, they formed something greater than any individual could be. Released his desperate grip on total control, and instead let the network of minds find their natural balance. Park took primary responsibility for navigation and movement, handled sensor analysis and scientific observations. Reeves managed all communications. The engineering crew became one with the ship's maintenance systems, feeling every fluctuation in power flow and automatically making adjustments. And became the conductor, the central consciousness that could perceive the whole while trusting the parts to function independently. The panic faded, replaced by a sense of rightness. This was what they were meant to be now. Not humans pretending to be a ship, but a new form of existence that was both and neither. "Better," Lyrazen said, and could hear the relief in her voice. "Now let's see what you can do." The next 12 hours were spent learning to use their new capabilities. Moving through space required thinking about destination and intent rather than plotting courses. The ship responded to will, probability drives, engaging to place them exactly where they needed to be across multiple timelines simultaneously. Weapons testing revealed capabilities that conventional physics. The Endeavor could fire not at where a target was, but at where it could be, collapsing probability waves to ensure hits across multiple possible futures. Defense systems could predict incoming fire and exist in the timeline where they dodged, making the ship nearly impossible to hit with conventional weapons. But the most remarkable discovery was the shared consciousness itself. The crew could think together, combining their perspectives and expertise in ways that produced insights impossible for individuals. Would spot a pattern in sensor data, Park would see how it affected navigation, and would understand the strategic implications, all in the same instant. "You're ready," Marshall declared after observing their training. "The modifications have taken hold better than we projected. Your species' neural plasticity is remarkable." "How long were we out?" asked, his voice now emanating from the ship's speakers rather than a physical mouth he no longer needed. 46 hours, Lyrazen replied. "We have 4 days left before the Harvester Bridge completes, time to return to Coalition space and begin the real work." The journey back was nothing like the careful navigation required to reach Prime. The Endeavor simply decided to be at the edge of Coalition space, and the probability drives made it so. They didn't travel through hyperspace. They existed in the quantum superposition of being both at their starting point and their destination, then collapsed the wave function in favor of the destination. That will take some getting used to, Park's voice echoed through the neural network. I just piloted a ship by willing us to be somewhere else. Welcome to probability navigation, Lyrazen said. She had insisted on accompanying them, her presence a distinct warm point in the network that was slightly separate from the human consciousness. Your coalition is going to find this very disturbing. She wasn't wrong. The moment they appeared at the Nexus without any hyperspace signature or prior warning, the station went a full alert. Dozens of warships moved to intercept, weapons charging, demands for identification flooding the communications channels. This is Captain of the UNSS Endeavour, broadcast across all channels. Requesting permission to dock and address the Coalition Council, we bring critical intelligence regarding the Harvester threat and a solution to the crisis. The response was chaos. Some voices demanded they surrender immediately to face court-martial. Others insisted they were some kind of trick, a Harvester infiltration. A few, mostly from human ships, welcomed them back and asked what had happened. Finally, Ambassador Crystalline Seven's chiming voice cut through the noise. Captain, you and your vessel are ordered to maintain position while we analyze your ship's composition. Do not approach the station. Do not engage any systems. You will be boarded for inspection. Negative, Ambassador replied. We don't have time for inspections and committees. The Harvester Bridge completes in 4 days. After that, this galaxy is finished. I need to address the full council immediately. You are in no position to make demands, Captain. You violated coalition law, entered restricted territory without authorization, and returned with a vessel that registers as partially alive on our sensors. You will submit to inspection, or you will be fired upon. Felt the tactical systems spinning up automatically, calculating firing solutions against the approaching warships. He could see the probability streams, the futures where they fought and won, where they fought and lost, where they tried to flee. None of them led to good outcomes. Stand down, Tactical, he ordered his crew through the neural link. We're not fighting our own people. But sir, one of the weapons officers protested, we could disable their ships without destroying them. Buy time to make our case. No, we came here to save the coalition, not to attack it. Opened a channel specifically to the human delegation at the Nexus. Ambassador, this is Captain. I know what I'm asking is unprecedented, but I need you to trust me. Get me an audience with the full council. What I've brought back from space could save us all, but only if we act now. There was a long pause. Then Ambassador's voice came through, heavy with conflicted emotions. Captain, you've put me in an impossible position. Humanity's membership in the coalition is hanging by a thread because of your actions. I want to believe you have good reasons, but I need more than that. I understand. Let me transmit sensor data from the Endeavour. Show it to your technical advisors. Let them see what we've become and what it means for fighting the Harvesters. Released a carefully curated data package, showing the ship's new capabilities without revealing all their secrets. The temporal drives, the probability weapons, the neural integration that made them faster and more adaptable than any conventional vessel. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Half the council wanted to destroy the Endeavour immediately as an abomination. The other half wanted to study it, understand it, analyze it for years before making any decisions. Nobody wanted to actually use it against the Harvesters. Except the humans. Ambassador came through again, this time with steel in his voice. Captain, I'm invoking humanity's Emergency Action Authority. As per Coalition Charter Section 7.3, when facing existential threats, member species have limited autonomy to take defensive measures. I'm authorizing you to dock at the human section of the Nexus. You'll still need to convince the Council, but at least you won't be shot at while trying. The human section of Nexus was much smaller than the territories of the older races, but it was home. Felt a strange nostalgia as the Endeavour settled into dock, even though he no longer had eyes to see with or a body to feel homesick with. Within an hour, he was facing the full Coalition Council via holographic projection. His form now appeared as a hybrid between his old human appearance and a stylized representation of the ship itself, a visual compromise that Lyrazen had helped him construct. Honored council members began, I know my actions seem reckless and illegal. By your standards, they were. But by human standards, they were necessary. When facing extinction, we don't debate, we act. You violated sovereign territory. Ambassador Crystalline 7 said coldly. You exposed yourself to without authorization. You transformed yourself and your crew into something that our own scientists cannot classify. These are not the actions of a responsible species. No, agreed. They're the actions of a desperate species, and make no mistake, we should all be desperate. The harvesters have consumed 17 galaxies. 17. Every species in those galaxies thought they had time to study the problem, to form committees, to analyze and debate. They were all wrong. They all died. The representative chittered in what the translator rendered as skepticism. And you believe your transformation makes you capable of fighting these harvesters? One modified ship against an invasion fleet. No, said. One ship isn't enough, but 100 ships might be. 1,000 would be better. They have offered to share their technology with any coalition vessel willing to undergo the transformation. The process takes 2 days per ship. We have 4 days before the bridge completes. If we start immediately, we can have at least 50 converted vessels ready for the battle. 50 abominations, the Crystalline 7 amended. 50 violations of natural law, of everything we have built our civilization upon. Better to fall with our principles intact than to survive as monsters. That's easy to say when it's not your species being harvested first, shot back. The harvesters are targeting agricultural worlds. The colony of New Harvest is first on their list. 3 billion people, Ambassador. How many of them do you think will care about principles when the harvesters come for their children? The chamber erupted in arguments. Some species supported immediate action. Others demanded more study. A few suggested negotiating with the harvesters, finding some kind of diplomatic solution. Watched the debate spiral into familiar patterns of indecision and delay. Through his enhanced perception, he could see the probability streams shifting. Every minute wasted decreased their chances of survival. The futures where the coalition acted decisively were growing dimmer, while the timelines of defeat grew stronger and more certain. Enough, he said, and his voice carried the weight of the Endeavor's power, resonating through the holographic projectors in ways that made the council members flinch. I'm not asking for your permission anymore. Humanity is acting independently. We're offering the transformation to any ship crew that wants it, any species that wants to survive. We're preparing for battle regardless of what this council decides. If you want to debate while worlds burn, that's your choice. But we're done waiting. The implications were clear. Humanity was willing to split from the coalition if necessary, to go their own way rather than die following someone else's slow deliberation. Ambassador stood, his holographic form radiating determination. The human delegation supports Captain's proposal. We will begin converting human vessels immediately. Any other species willing to join us is welcome. One by one, other delegates stood. The whose world was under immediate threat, the who had lost their to war centuries ago and refused to lose another. The who existed as energy beings and found the concept of transformation less disturbing than physical species did. Even a few, normally humanity's most vocal critics, admitted that survival trumped principles. By the end of the session, 47 ships had volunteered for transformation, with more considering it. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. The next 4 days were a blur of activity. The engineers worked around the clock, converting ship after ship to the new hybrid form. Each transformation was slightly different, adapted to the specific biology and psychology of the crews involved. Though with their hive mind structure, found the neural integration natural and easy. The individualistic to a fault struggled with the shared consciousness but persevered. They simply merged with their ships on a fundamental level, becoming truly hybrid beings of energy and matter. And coordinated it all, his consciousness spreading across the growing fleet through quantum entanglement with each newly transformed vessel. He became not just the Endeavor, but a node in a network of awakening ship minds, each one unique but connected to the whole. On the 4th day, as the last ship completed its transformation, the sensors screamed a warning. The Harvester Bridge had stabilized ahead of schedule. The invasion was beginning. The sector burned with light that shouldn't exist in normal space. The dimensional bridge had fully manifested, a writhing tear in reality that stretched for thousands of kilometers. Through it poured the Harvester fleet, ship after ship of organic nightmare made manifest, each one a testament to the consumption of entire civilizations. Perceived it all through the enhanced senses of the Endeavor and the 46 other transformed vessels that had formed up around him. They hung in space like predators waiting to strike, their hulls shimmering with temporal energy as they existed in quantum superposition across multiple probable timelines. "Fleet status," commanded, his voice rippling through the neural network that connected all the transformed ships. Captain is of the vessel Unity responded first, her hive mind consciousness steady and calm. "All systems optimal. My crew is ready. We will not let our fall." Captain of the ship Defiance followed. "Probability drives are stable. Weapons charged across all timeline branches. We're as ready as we'll ever be." One by one, the other captains reported in. Each voice was unique, carrying the personality and culture of their species, but all unified by the neural integration that made them more than simple ship commanders. They were living weapons now, conscious vessels designed for a war that conventional forces couldn't win. Behind them, the remainder of the coalition fleet assembled. Hundreds of ships, traditional warships crewed by beings who remained fully physical, fully separate from their vessels. They would provide support and cover, but everyone knew the real battle would be fought by the transformed vessels. Admiral Ahu had grudgingly accepted command of the combined fleet, broadcast on all channels. "Captain, you have tactical command of the transformed vessels. The rest of the fleet will follow your lead. Try not to get us all killed with your human recklessness." Almost smiled, an odd sensation when you no longer had a face. "I'll do my best, Admiral. All transformed vessels form up in delta pattern. We're going to probe their defenses, see how they respond to probability-based attacks." The fleet moved as one, ships flickering through space-time as they positioned themselves. Through his enhanced perception, could see the harvester vessels beginning to react. They shifted through probability space, attempting to exist in timelines where the coalition fleet wasn't a threat. But they hadn't accounted for ships that could pursue them through those timelines. "All vessels weapons-free. Fire across all probability branches." The transformed ships unleashed hell. Their weapons didn't simply fire in one timeline but across infinite variations simultaneously, each shot existing in superposition until it collapsed into the timeline where it struck true. The harvester ships, designed to dodge by existing elsewhere, found themselves hit in every timeline they tried to escape to. Explosions bloomed across the probability spectrum, harvester vessels rupturing and dissolving as their exotic matter destabilized. A dozen enemy ships died in the first salvo, and the satisfaction that rippled through the neural network was fierce and primal. "They're adapting," his voice came through from his position in the Endeavor's science systems. "The harvesters are learning to predict our firing patterns, collapsing their own probability waves to avoid our strikes." Of course they were. These beings had consumed 17 galaxies. They learned fast. "All ships switch to pattern Chaos 7, ordered. "Randomize your firing solutions, make yourselves unpredictable." The transformed fleet began firing in deliberately chaotic patterns, each ship making split-second decisions that even they couldn't predict ahead of time. It was antithetical to everything the Coalition had taught about coordinated fleet tactics, but it worked. The harvesters couldn't predict what the transformed ships would do if the ships themselves didn't know until the moment of action. More harvester vessels died, but their numbers were overwhelming. For every ship destroyed, 3 more emerged from the dimensional bridge. And they were learning with each engagement, adapting their tactics, finding ways to counter the probability attacks. "They're targeting the bridge between timelines," Lyrazen's voice came through the network. She had positioned herself aboard the Endeavor as an advisor, her consciousness a strange but welcome presence. "They're trying to collapse the quantum superposition that allows your ships to exist in multiple states. If they succeed, you'll be locked into a single timeline." "Can they do that?" asked. "Eventually, given enough time and data, yes. The harvesters are masters of dimensional manipulation. That's how they opened their bridges in the first place." Evaluated the tactical situation. The transformed fleet was holding their own, but barely. They were outnumbered 20-1, and that ratio was growing worse every minute. The conventional coalition fleet was barely participating, their weapons unable to reliably hit targets that existed in probability flux. "We need to destroy the bridge," decided. "Cut off their reinforcements. All transformed vessels concentrate fire on the dimensional anchor points. I'm transmitting coordinates now." Through his enhanced perception, could see the structure of the bridge itself, the way it was anchored to specific points in space-time. Destroy those anchors and the bridge would collapse. Of course, those anchor points were defended by the largest harvester ships, the dreadnoughts that dwarfed even the Nexus. "That's a suicide run," Captain observed. "Yes," agreed. "Which is why I'm going first. Endeavor will take point. The rest of you provide covering fire." "Sir," Park's voice was quiet in his mind. "We knew this might happen. We're with you." Felt the determination of his crew, their willingness to die if it meant stopping the harvesters. But more than that, he felt the resolve of every transformed ship in the fleet. They had all made the same choice, given up their humanity or their physical forms to become weapons. Now it was time to be those weapons. The Endeavor accelerated, reality bending around it, as the probability drives pushed the ship to speeds that conventional physics couldn't explain. The other transformed vessels followed, forming a spear aimed at the heart of the Harvester formation. The enemy responded with overwhelming force. Energy weapons that existed in dimensions humans had no names for lashed out, striking at the transformed ships from angles that shouldn't exist. Several vessels took critical damage, their crews screaming through the neural network as their consciousness began to fragment. But they kept coming, guided the Endeavor through probability space, existing in the timelines where enemy fire missed, collapsing into reality only to fire his own weapons before shifting again. It was like dancing through a storm, every step calculated across infinite possibilities, every choice leading to branches of survival or destruction. The first anchor point loomed ahead, a massive structure that pulsed with the same wrong light as the dimensional bridge. It was defended by 3 dreadnoughts, each one capable of destroying entire fleets. "All weapons maximum power," ordered. "Target the anchor's power core. We're going to hit it with everything we have across every timeline simultaneously." The transformed fleet concentrated their fire, probability weapons collapsing into a singular moment of devastating force. The anchor point exploded, fragments of it scattering across multiple dimensions simultaneously. The dimensional bridge shuddered, its stability compromised. But the cost was high. 6 transformed vessels were destroyed in the attack, their consciousnesses dissolving back into quantum foam. Felt each death as if it were part of himself dying, the neural network carrying their final moments to everyone connected. "Keep moving," he commanded, grief and determination mixing in his voice. "We have 4 more anchor points to destroy. For every ship we lose, we save millions of lives." The battle became a nightmare of probability and pain. The transformed fleet darted through spacetime, striking at anchor points while the Harvester fleet tried to stop them. Ships died on both sides, reality itself screaming under the strain of so much probability manipulation happening simultaneously. Captain Is and the Unity were destroyed, taking out the second anchor point, the hive mind's final thoughts of protecting their echoing through the network. The ship Defiance sacrificed itself to destroy the third, Captain's last act one of defiant courage that would be remembered for generations. By the time they reached the 4th anchor point, the transformed fleet was down to 23 ships. But the dimensional bridge was failing, its stability degrading with each destroyed anchor. The flow of Harvester reinforcements had slowed to a trickle. "One more," said, his consciousness stretched thin by the strain of battle and loss. "One more anchor and the bridge collapses. We can do this." The remaining Harvester forces threw everything at them, a desperate defense of the final anchor point. The conventional coalition fleet finally found their moment, surging forward to draw enemy fire away from the transformed vessels. Admiral's voice boomed across all channels. "We may not be able to fight like you do, Captain, but we can die well. All ships, maximum attack speed. For the coalition." The traditional warships charged into the Harvester formation, weapons blazing. They died by the dozen, but they bought precious seconds for the transformed vessels to reach the final anchor point. Didn't hesitate. The Endeavor dove through the Harvester defensive line, taking hits that would have destroyed any conventional ship. His consciousness was fragmenting, the neural network straining under damage to both the ship's systems and his crew's bodies. He could feel Park struggling to maintain navigation, desperately routing power around failing systems, Reeves trying to coordinate with the few remaining transformed ships. They were dying, but they were going to finish this first. "All remaining vessels fire everything," commanded. "Collapse the probability wave, hit the anchor in every timeline that exists." The transformed ships unleashed their final attack, probability weapons firing across infinite branches of reality simultaneously. The universe itself seemed to hold its breath, as quantum superposition collapsed into a singular, definitive outcome. The anchor point exploded. The dimensional bridge, already unstable from the loss of its other anchors, couldn't sustain itself. It began to collapse, reality rushing in to fill the void where it had existed. The harvester ships still on the other side were cut off, trapped in whatever hellish dimension they called home. The ships on this side found themselves suddenly vulnerable, their connection to their home dimension severed. What followed was a massacre in reverse. The conventional coalition fleet, no longer facing enemies that could phase through probability space, tore into the remaining harvesters with savage efficiency. Without their dimensional tricks, the harvester ships were just ships, and the coalition had centuries of experience fighting conventional wars. Within an hour it was over. The harvester fleet was destroyed, the dimensional bridge was gone, and the galaxy was saved. But the cost had been terrible. Of the 47 transformed vessels that had entered the battle, only 8 survived. The Endeavor was one of them, but barely. Massive sections of the ship were destroyed, life support was failing in multiple compartments, and could feel members of his crew dying as their suspension pods lost power. "Get me damage reports," he managed to say, his consciousness barely holding together. "Sir," Park's voice was weak, "primary power is at 7%. Life support is critical in sections A through G. We've lost 40% of the crew. The neural network is fragmenting. We need immediate medical evacuation and repair." Tried to respond, but his consciousness was splintering. The strain of the battle, the deaths he had felt through the neural network, the damage to both ship and crew, it was too much. He was dissolving, fragmenting across probability space, unable to maintain coherent thought. And then Lyrazen was there, her consciousness wrapping around his like a blanket, holding him together through sheer force of will. "Stay with me," she said urgently. "Don't fragment, focus on my voice, let me be your anchor." "We won," managed to think. "Yes, you won, but you need to survive your victory. Hold on, help is coming." Through the haze of fragmentation, perceived vessels arriving, ships designed to exist outside linear time that had observed the entire battle from a safe remove. They had been waiting, ready to provide assistance once the outcome was determined. Now they moved among the survivors, their advanced medical technology working to stabilize both ships and crews. The Endeavor was taken in tow, transported to Prime for repairs. Felt his consciousness slowly stabilizing as the engineers worked their temporal magic, existing in the timeline where the ship was already repaired and pulling it into the present. Days passed, or maybe weeks. Time was strange when you existed partially outside it. Slowly regained coherent thought, his consciousness reconsolidating as the ship healed around him. His crew recovered as well, though many bore scars, both physical and psychological, that would never fully heal. When finally felt capable of communication, Lyrazen was waiting for him. "You did it," she said simply. "Against all probability, you closed the bridge and saved the galaxy. The harvesters won't return for centuries, if ever. They've learned that this galaxy has teeth." "At what cost?" asked. His voice carried the weight of all the deaths he'd felt through the neural network, all the transformed ships that had been destroyed, all the conventional vessels that had died buying time. 3,417 coalition personnel dead, Lyrazen said quietly. 39 transformed vessels destroyed, but the alternative was the consumption of trillions. You saved the galaxy, you and every person who chose transformation over safety, action over deliberation. "I'm not sure I feel like a hero." "Heroes rarely do. They're too busy counting what they lost to celebrate what they saved." Lyrazen paused. "The Coalition wants to award you their highest honors, make you an admiral, give you command of a new fleet of transformed vessels. They've finally realized that your recklessness was actually vision." "Do I get a say in that?" "Of course, you're still you, even if you exist as part of a ship now. The question is what you want to do next." Considered his options. He could accept the promotion, become a symbol of the new way of warfare that the galaxy would need. Or he could refuse, perhaps retire to some quiet corner of space where he and his crew could exist without the weight of galactic expectations. But then he thought about the vision Lyrazen had shown him that first day on Prime, the probability streams spreading out from his choices. He saw now what she had seen then, that his choice to act immediately, to embrace transformation, to risk everything on a desperate gamble, had opened paths to survival that shouldn't have existed. The galaxy needed people willing to make those kinds of choices. The old races were wise and cautious, but wisdom without boldness was just another form of cowardice. Someone needed to be willing to try the impossible. "I'll take the promotion," said, "but on one condition." "Which is?" "You keep your promise. You find a way to reverse the transformation. Not for me, but for my crew. They deserve the choice to be human again if they want it." Lyrazen was quiet for a long moment. "We will try. The Temporal Council has already begun researching possibilities. It may take decades, possibly centuries, but we will not give up. Your sacrifice has earned our people's eternal gratitude and effort." "Then I'll wait, we all will." Paused. "You knew, didn't you? When you asked me your question on the Nexus, you knew what was coming. You saw the timelines where we failed and the ones where we succeeded." "I saw possibilities," Lyrazen admitted. "But probability is not certainty. Even I could not have predicted exactly how you would succeed. You and your crew created new possibilities through sheer determination and willingness to sacrifice. That's what makes humanity special. You're young enough to still believe in the impossible." Through his enhanced senses, could see Prime outside, the crystalline structure that existed across multiples simultaneously. He could perceive the crew of the Endeavor recovering in medical bays, their minds still linked to his but with their own agency, their own choices. He could feel the other surviving transformed vessels, scattered across the galaxy but connected through the quantum network, each one a testament to the price of survival. "Do you want me now or later?" repeated the question that had started it all. "I think I understand what you were really asking now. You were asking if I wanted a miracle immediately, without understanding the cost, or if I wanted to wait to learn to be ready for the transformation. I chose immediately because that's what the moment required." "And do you regret it?" Thought about everything he'd lost, his physical body, his simple humanity, the future he'd imagined for himself. But he also thought about Earth still spinning in space, about the trillions of lives that continued because he'd made his choice. "No," he said finally, "I don't regret it, though I have to admit when you first asked me that question, my mind went completely blank. I had no idea what you were talking about." Lyrazen laughed, the sound like wind chimes in a summer breeze. "That moment of blank confusion was when you were perceiving the infinite possibilities ahead of you, even if you didn't know it. Your consciousness briefly touched the probability streams, saw the weight of the choice before you, and couldn't process it all. That moment of mental silence was actually your first glimpse into nonlinear time perception. So I was experiencing temporal phenomena even before the transformation. Humans have more potential for it than they realize. Most species can't naturally perceive probability streams at all. But humans have this strange capacity for intuition, for making leaps of logic that bypass conscious reasoning. That's just probability perception operating at a subconscious level. The transformation simply brought it into your conscious awareness. Absorbed this information, another piece of understanding about what he had become. Around him, the Endeavor continued its healing process, metal and crystal and living tissue knitting back together into something stronger than before. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now you return to Coalition space as a hero. You train the next generation of transformed vessel crews. You stand as proof that the galaxy can adapt, can evolve, can become something new when necessary." Lyrazen paused. "And you give others hope. Hope that sacrifice has meaning, that transformation isn't just loss but also gain, that humanity's recklessness is actually courage by another name." The Endeavor departed Prime a week later, repaired and upgraded with new technology. Who had been a simple starship captain, returned to Coalition space as Admiral, commander of the temporal fleet and living symbol of the galaxy's new age. The scars remained, both on the ships and on the souls of those who had transformation. The memories of lost crew members haunted the neural networks. The weight of survival when so many had died pressed heavy on every consciousness that had witnessed the battle. But they had won. Against impossible odds, against an enemy that had consumed 17 galaxies, they had stood firm and said no. And in doing so, they had proven that youth and courage and stubborn refusal to accept defeat could triumph over ancient malevolence. The galaxy would remember the Battle of Sector for generations. They would tell stories of the transformed vessels, of the captains who gave up their humanity to save humanity. They would debate the ethics and the cost and the necessity of it all. But they would tell those stories in a galaxy that still existed, in a universe that hadn't been consumed and harvested and restructured according to the harvester's design. And that made all the difference. Stood watch over the stars, his consciousness spread across the Endeavor and connected to every transformed vessel in the fleet. He monitored the probability streams, watching for threats, preparing for the next crisis that would inevitably come. Because that was what he was now, an eternal guardian, a living weapon, a consciousness that existed partially outside time itself. He had answered Lyrazen's question with action rather than words, had chosen transformation over safety, had become something more than human to preserve humanity itself. And somewhere in the quantum foam of infinite possibilities, in the probability streams that only the transformed could perceive, he could still see that moment on the Nexus when Lyrazen had asked her question, and his mind had gone blank with the weight of futures unfolding before him. He had chosen, and the galaxy lived because of that choice. It was enough. And this time the galaxy would fight back with weapons the harvesters had never faced before. Of choice. He had chosen, and now he would become the consequence of that choice. But it was a path, a chance, a way to fight back against the darkness that had come for them all. "Tell me what you need from me," said Urgt, and with them the end of everything the Coalition had built over.